The music academy was buzzing with excitement and tension all at once. Students shuffled nervously in their seats, whispering to each other about the famous maestro who was visiting today. His reputation was legendary. Stories about his talent, sharp eye, and unforgiving critiques were passed from one student to another, like secrets shared in hushed tones. Some admired him, others feared him. Everyone, however, knew that this was a rare opportunity to perform in front of someone who could change their future. In the corner of the room, a teenage girl sat quietly at the back. She was small, almost fragile in appearance, and her presence was easy to overlook. She clutched her music sheet tightly, her fingers tapping nervously against the paper as if the rhythm could calm her racing heart. She had been practicing for hours every day for months, pouring herself into the piano. But now that the moment had arrived, doubt crept in. She wondered if she was ready. She wondered if she would be laughed at or humiliated. The maestro arrived, sweeping into the room with the kind of confidence that filled the space. He wore a crisp suit and walked with the poise of someone who knew he owned every note in the world. His gaze scanned the students sharply, and a few immediately felt the weight of his presence. Some tried to sit taller, hoping not to appear weak under his piercing eyes. "Who will volunteer to play first?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the chatter. There was a long pause. Many students looked down at their music sheets or fidgeted nervously, hoping someone else would go. The teenage girl hesitated, but then a quiet determination settled over her. She raised her hand slowly, unsure if the maestro had even noticed her. "You?" he asked, his tone dripping with surprise and perhaps amusement. "Are you certain? You look far too young to understand anything beyond the basics." Her cheeks burned, but she nodded. She was used to doubt and dismissal. That was part of being a young musician who practiced silently in her room, where her talent had no audience except for herself. She had spent countless nights learning difficult pieces, feeling the music in ways that textbooks could never explain. And yet, here she was, standing on the brink of being judged by the man whose reputation alone had intimidated generations. The maestro leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Very well," he said, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. "Let us see if your hands are capable of anything worth noticing." The girl walked toward the piano, trying to steady herself with each step. Her heart was pounding, not just from fear, but from a deep love for music that refused to be silenced. She sat down and adjusted the bench, fingers hovering above the keys. The room seemed to hold its breath. Every eye in the academy was on her, and every whispered expectation felt like a weight on her shoulders. She began with a simple warm-up, letting her fingers flow over the keys, feeling the vibrations and gradually calming herself. Then she moved into the first piece she had prepared, one she knew she could play with both precision and emotion. The notes came out carefully at first, then more confidently as she found the rhythm in her own heart. It was a melody she loved, full of highs and lows, and as she played, something remarkable happened. The room, which had been filled with tension and expectation, began to soften. The air felt lighter. The audience leaned in, captivated. But then the maestro interrupted. He slammed his hand on the edge of the piano and frowned. "Stop," he barked. "Do you call that music? That is amateurish. Your timing is off, your touch is weak, and you have no understanding of the depth required for this piece." A murmur ran through the room. Some students shifted uncomfortably, not sure whether to defend her or remain silent. The teenage girl felt her hands freeze, her confidence threatened by the harsh words. She wanted to protest, to explain the care she had taken, but she remembered something her teacher had once told her. Music speaks louder than words. Let it be your voice. Taking a deep breath, she restarted the piece. She ignored the maestro's scornful gaze and focused entirely on the piano. Her fingers moved more fluidly now, her heart guiding each note. She let the music carry her, letting every emotion she had felt over years of practice flow through her hands. The initial mistakes disappeared, replaced by a melody that was alive, expressive, and undeniable. The maestro watched, his expression a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. He had never seen a student respond to criticism in this way. Most would shrink, stutter, or stop entirely. But she continued, her eyes fixed on the keys, her mind on nothing but the music. The audience began to notice the change too. Their whispers faded, replaced by quiet admiration. The young girl's playing was no longer just a practice. It was a declaration, a statement of her talent and her resilience. When she finished the piece, there was a pause, a heavy silence in the room. Even the maestro, who rarely showed surprise, seemed momentarily stunned. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, then grew into a steady wave as students and teachers recognized the courage it had taken to continue under scrutiny. The teenage girl stood, bowed slightly, and returned to her seat, her heart still racing but now filled with a quiet pride. The maestro leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, perhaps curiosity, perhaps grudging respect. He did not smile, and he did not praise her, but he did something more interesting. He began to watch her more closely, as if suddenly, she had become worth noticing. The other students sensed it too. What had started as an embarrassing moment for the girl was turning into something much bigger, a turning point where talent could no longer be ignored, even by someone as formidable as the maestro. As the class continued, the teenage girl realized that the journey was only beginning. The humiliation had been a spark, but it had also lit a fire within her. She was determined not just to play for herself, but to show the world what she could do. Every note she had played, every vibration that left the piano, was a step toward proving that talent and passion could not be silenced by fear or ridicule. She was ready for whatever challenge the maestro would throw at her next, even if it seemed impossible, because now she knew she had the courage to face it head-on. After the brief applause and the quiet murmurs, the atmosphere in the music academy shifted slightly. Students glanced at each other, some with surprise, others with curiosity. No one had expected the teenage girl to play so confidently after the maestro's harsh criticism. Yet, despite the applause, the maestro remained composed, his expression unreadable. It was clear he had not yet revealed his full intentions. He cleared his throat, his gaze settling on the young girl once more. "Since you claim to be capable, let us test you with something far more challenging," he said, his voice measured but firm. He reached for a piece of sheet music from the stand beside him, and held it up for the audience to see. It was a composition renowned for its complexity, a piece even seasoned pianists approached with caution. Some students in the room gasped quietly, recognizing the difficulty immediately. "This is a piece I attempted at a recent concert," the maestro explained. "Even I could not complete it flawlessly. And now, I ask you to try. Show me if you can achieve what I could not." A hush fell over the room. The young girl felt a sudden chill. She had studied many compositions in her private practice, but this one was known to be nearly impossible to perform perfectly. She hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding. She had prepared, yes, but never in front of such a critical audience, and never under the gaze of someone who was known for destroying young musicians' confidence. Despite the fear, she felt a flicker of determination. She remembered the countless nights she had spent with her piano, learning to express herself through the keys, letting the music flow from her soul. She had learned that true music came from within, and that talent could shine even under pressure. Slowly, she rose from her seat, the sheet music in hand, and walked to the piano with careful steps. The audience watched silently, some leaning forward in anticipation, others exchanging nervous glances. The maestro crossed his arms, his eyes sharp and observant, studying her every move. She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. The piece was intimidating, filled with complicated passages and rapid sequences that required absolute precision and control. She started the first notes cautiously, testing the melody, feeling its rhythm and flow. Her fingers moved with care, but soon confidence began to build. She remembered each part she had practiced so many times, the finger movements and the emotion behind each phrase. As she continued, her body seemed to sync with the music. Each note was deliberate, each chord full of depth. She was no longer just playing. She was living the music. The maestro's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his otherwise stern face. He had expected hesitation, mistakes, or faltering hands. Instead, he saw a young musician performing with precision and feeling, a rare combination he seldom encountered. The audience, too, began to lean closer, captivated by the unexpected confidence and talent of the teen. As she progressed, the piece became even more demanding. Rapid scales, intricate harmonies, and sudden shifts in rhythm tested her concentration. Her fingers moved swiftly, yet with elegance, keeping every note clear and expressive. She allowed herself to feel the music, letting it guide her movements rather than simply executing mechanical patterns. There was a fluidity to her playing that made the impossible passages sound natural, almost effortless. The audience could feel the tension and release in the music. Each crescendo and decrescendo carried emotion. Every pause seemed deliberate and meaningful. It was as if the piano itself was speaking through her. telling a story only she could narrate. Some students closed their eyes, absorbing the power of the performance, while others whispered quietly to each other, astonished at what they were witnessing. Midway through the piece, the complexity reached its peak. The tempo accelerated, demanding precise coordination and mental focus. Many experienced pianists had failed at this part, yet the teen continued undeterred. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving quickly, but never losing control. Each note was clear, every chord resonant. Even the maestro's expression softened as he watched, the faintest hint of admiration beginning to show. He had seen talent before, yes, but rarely such courage combined with skill. As she neared the final passage, the tension in the room became palpable. Students held their breath, captivated by the determination and grace of her performance. The climax of the piece required an almost impossible leap in both speed and accuracy. Most performers would falter, but she didn't. She let the music flow through her, trusting her training and instinct. Her hands moved with purpose, her mind focused entirely on the sound, and the room was filled with the richness of her mastery. The last notes rang out, clear and strong, and she held them until they faded naturally, leaving a silence that felt heavy and electric. For a moment, no one moved, no one spoke. The maestro, who had been so critical and imposing, looked down at the piano, then back at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, and then slowly, the audience erupted into applause. It started quietly, as if people were testing whether the performance had truly ended, then grew into a powerful wave of appreciation. The teenage girl stood, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of what she had just accomplished. Her heart raced with exhilaration and relief. She had faced the maestro's challenge, the piece no one else dared to complete, and she had done it. The applause washed over her, but her mind was focused on the music itself, the journey she had taken with each note, and the silent satisfaction of proving to herself that she could succeed. The maestro finally spoke, his voice measured and calm. "Impressive," he said, a single word that carried more weight than hours of praise could. It was rare for him to admit admiration, and even rarer for him to recognize the courage it took to face such a challenge. He had expected her to stumble, to fail, but instead, she had surpassed every expectation. The other students looked at her with new eyes. The quiet, unassuming girl at the back of the room had become a symbol of perseverance, skill, and passion. They realized that talent was not always loud or flamboyant. Sometimes it was hidden, quietly nurtured, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. She had taken a step that few had the courage to take, and in doing so, she had commanded respect not just from the maestro, but from everyone present. The class continued, but the energy had shifted. The maestro paid closer attention to her, giving more careful instructions, challenging her in ways he had not before. There was a sense that the encounter had changed something fundamental, not just for her, but for him as well. He had seen determination and artistry combined in a young musician, and it had caught his attention in a way few others ever had. For the teenage girl, the experience was transformative. The humiliation she had faced earlier now felt distant, replaced by a growing confidence in her abilities. She realized that music was more than performance. It was a conversation, a connection, and a reflection of dedication and heart. She had faced fear, criticism, and challenge, and emerged not just successful, but stronger and more determined. The piece she had played would remain with her as a milestone, a reminder that talent combined with perseverance could overcome even the harshest judgment. And while the maestro had humiliated her at the start, his challenge had given her an opportunity to show the depth of her skill, and she had taken it with grace, courage, and passion. In that moment, she knew she was ready for whatever lay ahead, confident that her music could speak where words might fail. The next morning, the academy felt different. Word of the teenage girl's performance had spread quickly, and the air was thick with curiosity and admiration. Students whispered in corners, exchanging details about how she had tackled the maestro's impossible piece. Some were inspired, others intimidated, but all were eager to see what would happen next. The young girl herself tried to move quietly through the hallways, but she could feel the weight of everyone's attention. Her heart pounded, not from fear this time, but from the excitement of what lay ahead. Later that day, the maestro called for a private session with her. She followed him into a small practice room, the polished piano gleaming under the soft lights. The room was silent except for the faint sound of her own footsteps. She felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. Would he critique her again, or would he push her further? She had already faced his public criticism and come out strong. But this felt different. Here, it would be just the two of them, and she knew he would not hold back. The maestro sat down across from her, folding his hands over his lap. He studied her quietly for a moment, then gestured toward the piano. "I want to see how you handle improvisation," he said. "Do not play a prepared piece. I want to see the music in your mind, your ability to respond to emotion and technique without guidance." Her stomach tightened. Improvisation was not something she had practiced publicly. In private, she often experimented, allowing the music to flow spontaneously. But now, in front of him, it felt like stepping into unknown territory. Still, she nodded, placing her fingers on the keys, letting herself breathe and settle into the space around her. She began with a soft melody, tentative at first, feeling the resonance of the piano beneath her fingertips. Slowly, confidence returned. The music began to flow, each note a reflection of her emotions, a story without words. The maestro watched carefully, his usual stern expression not softening, yet there was a sense of intrigue in his eyes. He leaned forward slightly, listening intently, as though he were trying to unravel the complexity of her mind through the music she played. As she continued, she allowed herself to be fully immersed in the sound. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and rhythm, weaving subtle variations into the melody. The music became expressive, emotional, and alive. Every note seemed to tell a part of her journey, the quiet determination, the fear faced and overcome, the joy of discovering her own strength. It was a performance unlike any other, spontaneous yet intentional, raw yet controlled. The maestro tapped his fingers on his chin, clearly impressed though unwilling to show overt approval. He interjected occasionally with suggestions, asking her to explore different techniques, to emphasize certain passages, and to express emotion in new ways. She adapted quickly, taking each challenge as an opportunity to push herself further. It was a dialogue, a conversation between her and the piano, with the maestro observing and guiding. Rather than judging outright, minutes stretched into an hour, and still she played, discovering new layers of the music, uncovering feelings she had not realized she could express. The room seemed to fade away, leaving only her, the piano, and the sound that resonated deeply in the space. She was no longer just a student performing. She had become a musician, creating and interpreting at the same time. Her body moved naturally with the rhythm, her fingers dancing effortlessly across the keys, each note precise, each pause intentional. The maestro finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "You have a gift," he said, his voice steady, lacking the usual sharpness. "You do not merely play notes, you create music that breathes. Few understand how to translate emotion into sound like you do." The teenage girl felt a warm rush of relief and pride. She had worked so hard, and to hear acknowledgement from someone of his caliber felt surreal. Yet, she remained humble, knowing that there was still much to learn, much to explore. She nodded, quietly acknowledging his words while focusing on the piano before her. He leaned back and observed her for a moment longer, then proposed a new challenge. "There is a piece I never completed in my youth. It has remained unfinished because no one has been able to interpret it correctly. I want you to try. Play it as you feel it should be played. Do not worry about technique alone. Focus on emotion, on understanding the intent behind every note." Her heart skipped a beat. The piece was legendary among the Academy's students, known for its complexity and emotional depth. Even the maestro, with all his skill, had admitted to leaving it incomplete. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety, but she also sensed an opportunity. This was a chance not just to play, but to prove that music could transcend difficulty when guided by heart and intuition. She studied the sheet music carefully, letting her eyes trace each note, each pause, and each instruction. She began slowly, feeling the nuances of the piece. At first, she played cautiously, wary of making mistakes, yet as she grew more comfortable, she allowed herself to interpret the music more freely. Her fingers moved with precision, yet her heart guided the rhythm and expression, giving the piece a vitality it had never fully achieved before. As she continued, she felt the emotions behind the music. The composition was complex not just technically but emotionally. It spoke of longing, of struggle, of triumph over adversity. She allowed herself to feel every layer, translating it into sound, turning the piano into a vessel for storytelling. The maestro watched silently, clearly intrigued, noting each choice she made, each subtle variation she introduced. Her interpretation was unique, personal, and yet faithful to the composer's vision. The room seemed to pulse with her music. Every note resonated, filling the space with a depth and clarity that was remarkable for someone so young. The teen was no longer concerned with judgment. She was focused entirely on the music, allowing it to flow naturally from her soul through her fingertips. She reached the crescendo, the piece's most challenging passage, where technique and emotion collided in rapid succession. Her hands moved with precision, her mind focused, her heart guiding each note. And for a moment, it felt as if the piano itself was singing. As she reached the final chords, she played with confidence, letting each note linger and fade naturally, creating a silence that was almost tangible. The maestro sat motionless, his eyes wide, absorbing what he had just witnessed. The music had been completed, interpreted, and given life in a way he himself had never achieved. The room remained quiet for a long moment, the weight of the performance sinking in. Finally, he spoke, his voice a mixture of awe and respect. "You have done something remarkable. You have completed what I could not merely with skill, but with understanding and heart. Few have the courage to approach it, and fewer still to make it their own." She felt a swell of pride and humility. The challenge had been immense, yet she had faced it, guided by her passion and dedication. The maestro's acknowledgement was more than words. It was a recognition of her ability to transform difficulty into beauty, fear into courage, and music into storytelling. From that day forward, the academy viewed her differently. She was no longer the quiet, overlooked student. She was a musician whose talent demanded attention, whose dedication inspired others. The maestro himself became a mentor in a new sense, challenging her to grow further while respecting her unique approach. The performance had not just been about completing a piece. It had been about showing the power of resilience, creativity, and unwavering focus. In the days that followed, she continued to practice, to experiment, and to push her limits. The experience had taught her that music was more than notes on a page. It was a reflection of emotion, discipline, and courage. She had faced fear, criticism, and monumental challenge, and in doing so, she had discovered not just her skill, but her strength as a musician and as a person. Every time she sat at the piano, she remembered the feeling of completing that impossible piece, and she played with renewed passion, knowing that her journey had only just begun. The day of the Academy's showcase had arrived, and the air inside the auditorium was thick with anticipation. Students, parents, and music enthusiasts filled the seats, chatting quietly, unaware of the tension building backstage. For the teenage girl, each step toward the stage felt heavier than the last, not because of fear, but because of the enormity of the moment. She was about to perform the piece that had humiliated the maestro in the past, the very composition that no one else had completed fully. This was more than a performance. It was a test of everything she had learned, a moment that could define her future backstage. She adjusted her dress and took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over the keys of the grand piano on the stage, polished to a gleaming perfection. The maestro stood nearby, observing with the same intensity he always carried, his arms crossed, eyes locked on her. He had seen her grow, seen her tackle challenges that most students would have avoided, but he remained reserved, giving nothing away. The room beyond the curtains buzzed with expectation, a subtle pressure that pressed against her chest. She had to transform that tension into music, to make every note count. The stage lights brightened, illuminating the piano and the girl as she stepped forward. The audience quieted instantly, the hum of chatter fading into an expectant silence. She lowered herself onto the bench and placed her hands on the keys, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingertips. A sense of calm washed over her. This was where she belonged, where all the hours of practice, all the late nights, all the mistakes and small victories led her. She would let the music speak for her. She began with the first notes, delicate and tentative, letting the melody find its own rhythm. The opening passages were familiar, yet she treated them with fresh attention, emphasizing the subtleties that made the piece challenging. The audience leaned in, captivated by the clarity and emotion of her performance. Each chord, each scale, each pause was deliberate, carrying a story beyond the printed sheet music. It was a conversation between her and the piano, a dialogue of feeling and technique. As she progressed, the tempo increased, demanding both precision and fluidity. She felt the familiar rush of adrenaline and focus, a state she had come to love. The challenging passages approached, the ones that had made others falter, and she met them with confidence. Her fingers danced effortlessly, each movement purposeful, each note resonating fully. The audience could sense her mastery, the dedication behind every gesture. The music was alive, carrying the emotion she had poured into it over countless hours of private practice. The maestro watched, his eyes narrowing slightly, leaning forward in his seat. He had performed this piece himself and had failed, yet here was a young girl navigating its complexity with grace and determination. His usual stern demeanor softened, though he made no outward gestures of praise. The room, however, was not blind to the feat taking place. Students whispered to each other in astonishment. Parents leaned forward, and the collective energy in the auditorium seemed to bend toward the young pianist. Halfway through, the piece reached its most intricate section. Rapid scales, unexpected shifts, and deep, resonant chords demanded absolute control. Many pianists stumbled here, and the teenage girl could feel the challenge pressing against her, testing her resolve. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the music within her, letting her instincts guide her fingers. The notes flowed smoothly, each one clear and precise, forming a tapestry of sound that was both technically impressive and emotionally moving. The audience felt the tension, the climax building with each note, each crescendo more compelling than the last. She had learned to transform pressure into focus, doubt into determination. The music carried her forward, a living thing that responded to her every intention. The piece that had been impossible for the maestro now flowed through her, vibrant and complete. Every chord she struck was filled with purpose, every pause deliberate, every passage alive with the energy she had nurtured within herself. As she approached the final passage, the most daunting section of all, the auditorium was completely silent. The climax required speed, accuracy, and emotional depth simultaneously. Her hands moved with precision, her body swaying slightly with the music, fully immersed in the performance. Each note landed exactly where it needed to, each chord resonated, and every subtle dynamic choice added texture and meaning. It was a feat few had ever attempted, and she executed it flawlessly. The final chords rang out, powerful yet delicate, lingering in the air long after her fingers had lifted from the keys. Silence followed, heavy and electric, the kind that makes a room collectively hold its breath. Then, slowly, the audience began to applaud. It started as hesitant claps, then grew into a thunderous ovation. Students jumped to their feet, parents cheered, and even the most experienced musicians in the crowd were visibly moved. The teenage girl rose, slightly trembling, overwhelmed by the sheer force of emotion and recognition. She had done it. She had completed the piece that no one else had managed to finish, not just technically, but with soul and artistry. The maestro approached, his steps measured, his face a study in restraint. For a moment, it seemed he might say nothing, and the tension in the room grew. Then, in a quiet, steady voice, he spoke. "You have accomplished what I could not. You have not only completed the piece, but you have understood it, breathed life into it, and made it your own. Few can claim such mastery at any age." The words struck her deeply. It was not just recognition. It was an acknowledgement of her courage, her dedication, and her growth as a musician. She felt a mixture of pride and humility, understanding that this moment was not merely about completing a difficult composition, but about proving to herself and others that talent, combined with determination and heart, could overcome any obstacle. The audience continued to applaud, and she bowed again, her heart soaring. This performance would be remembered not just for the technical perfection, but for the way she had turned challenge into triumph, fear into confidence, and doubt into inspiration. The maestro, often seen as intimidating and critical, now stood beside her with a look of respect and a quiet pride that was rare for him to show. He had witnessed a transformation, not only in the music but in the young musician herself. After the performance, students and teachers alike came forward, praising her, sharing their admiration, and expressing how moved they had been by her playing. She listened, smiling quietly, absorbing the words but remaining grounded. She knew that this was a step in her journey, not the destination. Music was endless, a path of constant learning, and she was eager to continue walking it. Inspired and motivated by what she had just achieved backstage, the maestro placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Remember this feeling," he said. "The power of music is not in the applause or recognition, but in your ability to express yourself fully, to be fearless, and to trust your heart. Today, you have done all three." She nodded, understanding the depth of his words. The performance had been a test of skill, courage, and emotion, and she had succeeded. Yet, more importantly, she had discovered something within herself, a strength, a voice, and a love for music that could never be diminished. No matter the obstacles she faced in the future, she had faced the impossible and emerged victorious, not just in the eyes of the audience, but in the quiet, powerful truth of her own heart. After the applause had finally settled, the teenage girl stepped off the stage, her hands still tingling from the intensity of the performance. Backstage, the energy was electric. Students whispered in awe, teachers exchanged looks of respect, and the auditorium staff shook their heads in disbelief. The impossible had been done, and everyone who had witnessed it felt privileged to be part of the moment. The girl's chest swelled with a quiet pride, though her mind was calm. She knew that what mattered most was not the praise, but the journey she had taken to reach this point. The maestro approached her slowly. His usual stern expression softened with something rare, admiration. He extended his hand, and she accepted it, feeling the weight of the moment. He did not offer hollow praise or exaggerated gestures. His acknowledgement was real, measured, and meaningful. "You have shown extraordinary courage and insight," he said. "Not only have you mastered the piece, but you have done so with heart and understanding. You have made it your own." She nodded, a smile breaking across her face. It was the kind of validation that could not be taught, bought, or demanded. It was earned through patience, practice, and unwavering belief in herself. She realized that her journey had transformed her, not only as a musician, but as a person. The fear she had felt at the beginning, the humiliation she had endured, and the doubts that had tried to stop her had all become stepping stones toward growth. She had faced every challenge with determination and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected to her music than ever before. The audience continued to buzz outside the backstage doors, many eager to see her again, to hear her story, or to express their admiration. Students approached her with shy smiles, some even teary-eyed, thanking her for inspiring them. They had seen what perseverance, talent, and courage could accomplish, and they wanted to learn from it. She responded with gentle nods and quiet words, her humility matching the depth of her achievement. The impact of her performance extended beyond the notes she had played. It reached the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it. The maestro stood beside her, observing the interactions with the students. In the past, he had been known for his criticism, his ability to challenge and push students to their limits. But today he watched in a new way. He saw potential, respect, and inspiration unfolding before him. The young girl had not only proven herself through her performance, but she had also changed the dynamic of the room, shifting the way people viewed talent, courage, and determination. Later, in a quiet moment, the maestro led her back to the piano. The auditorium was empty now, except for the two of them, and the soft glow of the stage lights created a serene atmosphere. "There is more for you to learn," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Talent alone is not enough. Music requires discipline, understanding, and the ability to connect with those who listen. You have shown promise, but the journey continues." She nodded, feeling a sense of excitement rather than pressure. The thought of continuing her studies, of pushing herself further, was thrilling. She realized that every challenge she had faced, every note she had played, had been preparation for this moment and for the countless moments yet to come. Her heart was full of determination and anticipation, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As they played together, the maestro guiding and observing, she felt a sense of harmony and balance. Every note they played was a step in a conversation that had begun long before this moment, a dialogue of experience, skill, and passion. She could sense his approval without it being spoken, and she understood that respect was earned through action, dedication, and understanding. The connection between teacher and student, though challenging at times, had grown into a mutual recognition of talent and effort. The days that followed were filled with new opportunities, invitations to perform, lessons with experienced musicians, and discussions about her unique approach to interpretation came her way. She embraced each challenge with the same focus and care that had brought her to this point. Every performance became a chance to express herself, to tell a story through the piano, and to inspire others who might struggle with doubt, fear, or criticism. She continued to visit the academy regularly, working closely with the maestro and other teachers who recognized her potential. The relationship between her and the maestro evolved from one of initial criticism to mentorship, where guidance and challenge coexisted with encouragement and respect. She learned not just technique, but how to connect deeply with music, how to convey emotion and intent through every note, and how to use her experiences to strengthen her artistry. The experience had also changed her personally. The fear of public scrutiny, the weight of expectation, and the memory of humiliation were no longer burdens. Instead, they had become sources of strength, reminders of her resilience and ability to rise above challenges. She carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of her capabilities and committed to continuous growth. Her interactions with other students reflected her understanding and empathy. She encouraged them, shared her experiences, and became a role model through action rather than words. In the months and years that followed, her reputation grew, not because of a single performance, but because of the consistency, dedication, and authenticity she brought to her music. She performed in recitals, competitions, and informal gatherings, each time channeling the lessons she had learned into her playing. The memory of the maestro's initial criticism remained, not as a source of pain, but as a reminder of how far she had come and the power of perseverance. Through it all, she never lost sight of why she played. Music was her voice, her sanctuary, and her way of connecting with others. The experience with the impossible piece, the challenge posed by the maestro, and the journey to complete it had taught her that success was not measured by accolades alone, but by the courage to face fear, the determination to continue, and the passion to express oneself fully. Every note she played carried that truth, touching hearts, inspiring confidence, and creating moments that would be remembered long after the final chord faded. In the end, the teenage girl had transformed her story from one of humiliation to triumph. She had faced criticism, tackled the impossible, and emerged as a musician whose talent and courage could not be ignored. The maestro, who had once doubted her, now stood as a witness to her growth and a guide in her ongoing journey. Her music had become a testament to perseverance, passion, and the power of believing in oneself. She had proven that even in the face of doubt and challenge, true talent, nurtured with dedication and heart, could not only survive but flourish, inspiring everyone who heard it.